to India and Ireland, round Africa and back again. We don't really need to know just where we'll go. Maybe Canada, then to Brazil, then through the Alpine foothills. All I really want to know is, can we go? Oh baby, can we go? Round and around the globe.
Welcome to Take Me With You, episode 110. I'm Ryan,
And I'm Cheryl. We are two well-traveled people who want to go everywhere.
but that's not going to happen. So instead, we'll travel vicariously by inviting a guest to share their unique travel stories with us.
Today we're talking to Christine. Christine is a recent graduate of the University of Washington and majored
Go
in
Dogs.
musical theater. I totally
Sorry, I
got
messed
thrown
you
out
up.
there. Musical theater and international human rights, and was a dance minor, so you were busy. And
Yes.
now she is an intern at my place of work, and we're coworkers, and it's very exciting. Welcome, Christine.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Yay!
We're glad to have you here.
Christine and I were on a walk yesterday, and we
Mhm.
started talking about travel, and I was like, don't talk about travel. It's not on the podcast. It's not
Gotta keep it
allowed.
fresh.
Save it. We need the content.
I know. I don't
Exactly.
want to pretend to be surprised by your story. So
Not that we haven't done things like that before.
oh, totally. Yeah.
I mean, full disclosure, there have been times where we've lost like one person's audio and had to, I think this has happened to each of us, Cheryl.
Yes.
Had to go back and re-record just our side of the conversation.
And yeah, just like laughing along and being like, oh, no way. And yeah, it's very weird. You feel like an insane person doing that, but you know, all for the podcast.
Yep. So, Christine, we've got 3 questions that we like to ask all of our guests. And the first one
Alright.
is, why do you travel?
That is, so I was telling you guys earlier, I have been listening to your podcast a little bit, and I love hearing everyone's different reasons. And I feel like I hear some really, really good reasons, and I wish I had like such a deep, meaningful thought behind this. But honestly, I live in the time of planes, trains, and automobiles, and and it's really cool to live in an age where you can hop on a plane and, you know, go somewhere completely different in a matter of hours. And I love that idea of being so interconnected, and especially, you know, growing up, like social media, like there's so much connection everywhere. And so I think that's why I travel, which is, I wish I had a more deep answer, but because I can, is really the reason why.
I think that's a completely valid reason because it's like what people say for why they climb mountains, because it's there, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
100%.
Yeah, because you can. And if you can, you should.
Yes.
I mean, I suppose you have to want to, I suppose. But
Yeah,
Such a minor
definitely.
part of it. Yeah.
what type of traveler are you?
So I still new to traveling. I did a couple study abroads in undergrad, and I've done a few trips, you know, with friends and with my school in high school. So definitely still kind of figuring out what kind of traveler I am. Um, I like to plan where I'm going to be, and where I'm going to be staying, but I really like to keep my days open, so that just kind of whatever happens in that day is what happens in that day, and it makes me feel more, I guess, less like a tourist, right? Because you're just kind of letting the day unfold in front of you, and keeping yourself open is really great because you can ask for, you know, advice or tips on what to see and what to do, and you actually have time to then go
Mm.
see and do those things. Because if you've planned it too much, then you usually can't fit those in. So I like to have the logistics down, but the actual day to day, I like to keep it really, really open.
How far ahead of your trip do you like to lock in those logistics?
Um, that's a really good question. I think just based on my previous two really big trips that I planned myself, um, I had the idea months in advance, but it really was like maybe 2 months to a month out that I started booking things and planning things. And that might be a little bit of college procrastination more than anything else. I would be like, okay, I know I'm gonna be here on these dates, but I haven't actually booked a flight yet, so I should probably do that. The worst I've ever gotten is I booked a flight. I knew I was going to Bangkok. I knew I was going to Bangkok for like a month, and then I got the flight the night before I wanted to be there. That's the worst
Yikes.
I've ever done.
Wait,
But I was already in
how?
Chiang Mai. Well, I was already in Chiang Mai. It's like an hour
Oh,
flight,
okay.
and there's tons of them that go back and forth every day. And
Mm.
so we had our hostel ready to go, and then it was like the day before we wanted to leave, and we were like, shoot, do you think we should maybe get plane tickets to go down there? So that's the worst I've ever done. Typically,
So
I'm
that
not
was
like that.
more like getting a train ticket then, as far as like there's a
Yeah.
ton of them and it's
Yes.
like an
Yeah.
hour. Okay.
Exactly.
I thought you meant from
Yeah.
here. And it was like,
No,
Yeah.
holy
no,
moly, that would be so expensive.
that would be
So
crazy. No,
expensive.
I was already in Thailand, so it was
Okay.
easier.
Got it.
Would you
Yeah.
say that that's a similar way that you approach other planning things or just travel?
I think just travel. I really like to plan out things in advance in my, I guess, daily normal life, but I think there's something really special about travel, and I really like the idea of letting myself be a little more free and open with some structure. I don't think I'm the kind of person that could show up in a city and have no idea where I'm sleeping that night. I think that would definitely stress me out. But no, I think in day to day I'm a lot more structured, and so I kind of like in travel I let myself be a little more open.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's nice
Fun.
as an outlet for you, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Christine
That's
was
great.
also telling me that she is very open to trying foods, and that made me very
Yes.
proud of her. And that you were like one of 3 people who tried some meat at some village somewhere.
Oh, yes.
What was this?
Yes. This was so my first study abroad was to Thailand, and part of the program was we got to spend a week in some different villages in northern Thailand. And the very last one that we went to, the food in the first two was just phenomenal. I mean, absolutely delicious. The Thai food was so, so good. The last village, I don't know if it was because the other two had been so good, but it was a little rough. But it's what is made and it's what you're gonna eat. And there was 12 of us, and most people were like, I don't want to eat the meat, I don't want to get sick, I'm just gonna eat the vegetables. And there was me and 2 other people who were like, I'm a carnivore through and through. Like, I'll eat the chicken, like that's totally fine. So they gave us all the meat, and like our teachers too, our professors were like, you guys need to like eat this, right? So that like the plates are clear. So we gave them all the vegetables, we ate all the meat, and then everyone that ate vegetables got like food poisoning. And only me and the 2 other people who ate the meat were the only ones who didn't get sick. So it was like a total like
Oh,
karma
wow.
moment.
That's
So
so
we're just all
funny.
sitting there like, oh, this is fine. Everyone else was sick. I probably shouldn't be that happy that they got sick, but it was kind of satisfying. Makes me sound mean,
That's
but
really funny.
yeah, it was really
because
Huh.
it wasn't that they're normally vegetarians. It was that like
no,
they were being
no,
judgy and didn't trust it, right?
no. There were 2 girls that were typically vegetarian, so that I'm all fine with. But everyone else was being pretty judgy, and they were like, I don't want to eat the meat. Yeah.
That's so funny because as I'm thinking about it, at least from my limited experience, that fits actually what I would have predicted. That unless the meat was undercooked, the
Yes.
vegetables, because they would be washed in the water that may not be clean, that might have something that would make you sick. Whereas
Yep.
the meat being cooked, anything that might be on it for the most part would be killed. So you'd probably
Yes.
be fine.
And that was my thought. That was my thought exactly in the moment. I was like, eating raw meat universally is very bad. So if
Yep.
anything's going to be fully cooked, it's definitely going to be this. Yeah.
So proud.
So there's your life lesson, right?
There you go. Yeah. Well, and I don't know, maybe this is going to be your answer to the third question. I'm not sure, but what's your number one travel tip? Always eat the meat.
Always eat the meat.
Skip the vegetables.
Eat no vegetables. Be very unhealthy. No. I actually do have a solid answer for this one. This was out of the three. I knew you guys could ask me these three, and this one I want to gear specifically towards people who have not traveled very much. And are nervous to travel. My best friend in the entire world, she always jokes with me that she'll travel through me because traveling can be really nerve-wracking for some people, right? I remember the first time I went out to go travel internationally, I was petrified because I was like, I don't know, what am I going to do? I don't speak the language. It's going to be so hard. And then once you do it, it becomes a lot less scary. So I think that's my biggest travel tip, specifically for people who maybe are nervous about traveling. It's always that first step that is the scariest, and then it gets a lot easier. So my biggest tip is just do it. Just try it. Just go out, give it a shot. Maybe even plan like a little baby trip first, so that if you really don't like it, it's not very long. But I think those of us who have been traveling a lot or who want to travel a lot, we already have a lot of good tips. So maybe those who are a little apprehensive, my biggest tip is just try, because you'll learn that, an airport is an airport everywhere. And I have actually been one time walking down the freeway with my bags, trying to run and make it on the flight because we got mixed up on the airports, and this was in Vietnam. We got dropped off the wrong place, and we're like running down the street, like trying to like walk up a ramp, like a freeway ramp to like get to that. Oh yeah, no, it was crazy.
Oh boy.
But we made it. We were fine. I made it on the flight, and that was the craziest thing that's ever happened to me on a travel. So, just try, and even if it goes sideways, like, you'll figure it out. It'll be fine. So I'm still here, so it all works. Yeah.
I love that. It's not the false hope of everything will go perfectly, because we all know that's not true.
No,
But
things are gonna
you'll be
go
fine.
sideways, but you will make it. You will make it. And people are really, really nice, especially if they see you struggling trying to get to the airport. They will help you. So
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, and I think you get to learn new things about problem solving and flexibility and about yourself in different situations that I think are like so good for personal development.
Definitely. I feel like I've grown the most when I've gone on, especially my 2 study abroads. I came back and I had a lot more global experience, and that really makes you grow as a person.
So speaking of.
Yes.
Are you going to tell us about one of those experiences today, maybe?
Yes, I will.
Which one are you going to tell us about?
Well, I know I've mentioned the Thailand one a couple of times in this little beginning part, but I actually really want to talk about my study abroad to Rome, Italy, because I was there in the beginning of this year, and I was there during all of the 2020 COVID madness that was happening in Italy, and so I thought it'd be a very fitting story to talk about. Oh yeah.
So like in March?
Yeah, I got there. I was there January, February, and was evacuated in March. Yeah.
Oh, all right. You definitely have a unique travel story to share.
I'm so excited. This is so good.
Yeah.
So tell us, first of all, like, how does it work in signing up for a study abroad, like choosing your location, all those logistics leading up to actually going?
Yeah, for sure. So I knew I wanted to study abroad at least once in college. And the very first study abroad I ever went on was the one to Thailand. And I had been looking for a long time. Because UW is so big, they have lots and lots of study abroads you can pick from, which is amazing. and very overwhelming because,
Mm.
you know, it's stressful to try to figure out. And I had actually tried to do 2 different study abroads, and it just hadn't worked out, you know, with what I
Mm.
needed credits wise. And so I'd been doing all this research trying to find one. And I came back one day from class and it had been raining and I had to walk in the rain. And I was like, I don't like the Seattle rain. I'm leaving next winter. And so I literally went on the study abroad website and I was like, I'm going to go somewhere sunny, and like typed in all the sunny countries I could think of. I'm not even kidding. And that's how I found my first study abroad. So like that was definitely a God thing. He definitely was like, here, this is the one you're looking for.
Oh.
And then equally kind of as crazy as the first one, my senior year, my housing got a little messed up. And I wasn't going to be where I wanted to be winter quarter, housing wise in Seattle. And I was like, man, like I'm not excited for this. It's my senior year. Like this is kind of crummy. And so I emailed a professor I knew was doing my particular major, the International Human Rights, has a capstone project. And every year they do a capstone project. And one of the options is to go to Rome to do your project. And I knew they had already had the application. I knew they had already picked people. I had filled out the application, but then I decided not to go. So I emailed him about a month. I emailed him in December and was like, hey,
Whoa.
like, can I still go? And he was like, well, you know, our first meeting is next week, and I can talk to the study abroad director and see if you can go. So I actually decided to go to Rome like 4 weeks before the program started. So that was a little crazy. Yeah, Ryan, that was the same thought my parents had. They were like, really? You want to do this? I was like, yes, please. So that was very last minute, but I was so glad, especially now that things have shut down. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I went. For sure.
So had you been to Italy before?
Yes. So the summer before, me and my cousin had decided to go to Spain and hike a little bit of the Camino de Santiago, which we had wanted to do since we were in middle school, and we watched that movie, The Way. And we decided when we're in college, we're going to go. And then one day I called her up and I was like, so we're in college, like, are we going to do this? So we decided to go do just a little bit. We just did a week. And then we traveled afterwards. We went to Paris and London and Rome. So I'd been there for a couple days. I actually got to spend my 22nd birthday in Vatican City, which was really fun.
Nice.
So yeah, but I'd only been there for like a few days. So not too long.
But still, that's cool. You kind of you already knew what it looked like, and
yep, yeah,
you know, all of that. And then so how did it work with this study abroad program? Like, did they line up housing for you, and they just said these are your classes, or this is the plan, and it all kind of flows in, or did you have to piece things together?
Yeah, so both my study abroads were very much UW sending a group of students from Seattle to, you know, whichever city. So for Rome, especially because it was the Capstone project, like that was all set up. The classes were decided. UW actually has a Rome center. So there's a UW campus in Rome. Yeah,
there's a UW campus in Rome.
Well, it's 2 floors. It's 2 floors of a building.
I want a hoodie that says UW Rome.
That's so funny.
But supposedly it's the building where Julius Caesar was stabbed. But that is kind of a stretch. No one quite believes it because technically that building is like blocks and blocks long. So I'm like, okay, it's not really the building where this happened. But no, it's 2 stories of a beautiful, beautiful building in Campo di Fiorre. And I was actually very fortunate that my apartment was right across the square. So it took me like a minute to walk there every day. And that was all set up for us.
Wow.
I didn't have to find housing. They had housing, and it was a beautiful apartment just overlooking this square. And there's a bunch of bars down below and restaurants. So like every night there was music and people and lights, and it was so fun.
Oh, that's so cool.
I'm the teacher, right? So I have to ask the question, what was the academic side like? Now, you had done a study
Yeah.
abroad before in
hmm
Thailand the year
hmm
before. So we're already familiar with that a little bit. But like you
hmm
mentioned, this is the Capstone project. So it's
Yes.
very targeted. It's a specific small group of people who are all studying the same thing.
Yep.
Like how did the academic side work?
So it was definitely a lot more rigid in Rome and a lot more intense. And I actually did a capstone. So it's kind of like a task force. Well, it was a task force. It's called task force. But it's kind of like a think tank, if you will. And we
Hmm.
wrote a report on strategic military defenses for the EU in 2030. So it
Oh,
was,
interesting.
it was specific. It outlined specific military defenses we thought that the EU could bolster in the next 10 years so that by 2030 they would have, I guess, a better military plan, if you will. And I
Hmm.
was actually I like helped organize it, I guess.
Like the
So it
project
was,
manager or something similar to that?
yeah, exactly. I don't know why the word is escaping me. But we worked under a former ambassador to the United States. And then
Cool.
I worked with him. Yeah, no, it was really cool. He's really, really cool person. And I worked with him to build the team and then get the report out. And then we actually got to present it to someone who works in Brussels, and he actually like works with like the EU military. And so
Oh,
it's a
wow.
really, really cool project. The capstone is pretty much the reason why you apply to this major. It's a very unique capstone, and people have gone to Congress before to present these things, so it's kind of well known. And the one in Rome is new. Their option of doing this in Rome is new. I think I was like the fourth year to do it, but it's really cool because
Okay.
instead of focusing on like more American things, you do focus on like EU relations with America.
Hmm.
And so yeah,
That's
it
so
was a
cool.
really, really cool project. Definitely intense. You get a little upset when you're studying and writing and working so hard and you're in Rome and you're like, I just want to go out in Rome, but I also have to be a student and this is important for graduation. So it's kind of a
Mm.
balance.
That
Yeah.
sounds like a good description of like any study abroad, though, of like, I want to go do these things, but also
Yeah.
school.
Yes. Yeah, that is the caveat. That
Mm.
is, yeah, they were still really good about giving us time to go do things. And we had two trips as a class. We went to Naples and we went to Florence. So we did
Cool.
still get to go out and do things. And then I did some of my own travel over long weekends. So yeah, definitely still got to explore.
Nice. So Ryan wanted to talk about academics. I want to talk about not
Food.
academics. Well, yes, not food. Um, we need to talk about food. Food is very important.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. But then I also have questions about fun things, activities. So tell me all about the food. Tell me about your favorite food. Tell me
Oh,
about all of
the
the pasta
food.
and gelato and
I mean,
everything.
it's Italy.
Hmm.
I feel like that sums it up. I'm actually Italian, on my mom's side, and so I just, I was like, these are my people. Like, this is my food. This is what, my mom grew up, and she would make us, like lasagna, eggplant parmesan. We used to grow our own tomatoes and bottle our own. We'd have a whole day where we'd make a bunch of tomato sauce and bottle it so we could have
Hmm.
it. And so being there was really awesome. And I got to learn the best thing I learned how to make that I can actually make pretty well even now because I've practiced quite a few times is carbonara. And it turns out carbonara is like a very like to them it's almost like mac and cheese. Like it's comfort, it's simple though. You
Hmm.
eat it a lot. Everyone knows how to make it. And I actually made a really good friend while I was there. He's from Naples. And one of the girls in my program knew him from an exchange he actually did to UW. So when we were in Naples, we got to meet, and the two of us just like really hit it off with the banter. And so he gave me some good tips on making carbonara. And And so I kind of got the inside scoop, not gonna lie, from very authentic, from real Italian. And so that's my favorite thing to make.
Well, you're gonna need to make that for me.
Yes.
Probably.
Yes.
So yeah.
Definitely. Any excuse I make it for other people so that I can also eat it and not feel bad.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, I'm making this for someone else.
That's why I bake. So yeah, I get it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. No, but the food was my favorite restaurant was this tiny little place. It was like just past where kind of all the touristy places were, like really popular, which honestly, don't knock some of those because some of them are really popular for a reason. I know some people are like, oh, if there's too many people, don't go there. I'm like, but you know, if there's a lot of people there and they look happy. But there was this little tiny corner restaurant, right? There was this little tiny corner restaurant, and I went there. Oh gosh, I can't even tell you how many times I went there. And it was literally this like grandma, grandpa. The grandma was cooking, and the grandpa was the one doing all, you know, like the menus and stuff. They didn't speak any English, and I like spoke a few words of Italian, but I didn't really speak anything. And the first time I went there, I went to go order something, and he's like, no, 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 and like shook his head, and I'm like, oh, okay. And he was like, you want this? And I was like, all right, like I want that. And it turns out, because there was never anyone in this restaurant, there was only like, you know, I think once there was like 2 or 3 other people. So it was like whatever you ordered is what he got for dinner. So it would be like what he wanted to eat for dinner. But it was always so good. So it got to the point where I wouldn't even order anything. I just wait for him to bring me food because I was like, you're going to get something delicious. And I can't read the menu anyway. So like this works out. So that was my favorite little restaurant. I went there.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
But that always is the best because like the wait staff knows the inside scoop and they know and they know the chef and they know like when they prepare the thing this way it's even better. And if he's like owning it with his wife, that's the best. That's so fun.
Yeah. It was amazing.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are like the major touristy things that you saw, and what are the ones that you're like, oh, if somebody goes to Rome, they have to do these things too? And what are the ones that you're like, you know what, you could skip this, not really worth it? Because Ryan has not been to Rome.
Nope.
So
Cheryl has, but I have still
Ryan.
not been to Rome. So yeah, I definitely need to know these things.
So I might get some backlash on this, but the Colosseum is just depressing.
Because of the tourists?
No, it's the history of the Colosseum is really sad. And so that makes it difficult. Like we did a tour of it, and it's just no part of the history of the Colosseum is very good. And the inside honestly is not very interesting. The outside is the cool part, and you can walk around the outside for free. Like you can, you know, do laps around it and see everything. And so that's something I would definitely go and see it from the outside, but I don't think it's worth it to go inside. But while you're looking at the Colosseum, pop on over to the Forum and spend your whole day there and pay the extra few dollars for there's special things you can only get into if you have a pass, and it is so worth it. And it was pretty cheap for me because I was a student, so I think it was like $5 extra, and I didn't even have to pay for the ticket into the Forum because our program paid for it. So for $5 extra, you get into all these really cool exhibits, and the exhibits are all like, they have projectors to project what it used to look like. So you're in someone's home, right? And you can't tell because the whole thing is in ruins, but then all of a sudden the lights go down and they project what the rooms used to look like. And it was insane. And at one point they got like what are those like goggles that are like virtual reality, right? And they put the goggles on you and you're in a bathhouse and you can look up and down and sideways and you like see a reconstruction of the bathhouse. And it was the coolest thing I've ever done. And so like look at the Colosseum from the outside, take some pictures, really cool, but spend all day in the Forum. And my biggest tips for that, pay a little bit extra so you can do the extra exhibits because that's the cool part, and eat a bunch of food before you go because there is one vending machine in the whole place. And that's it. And honestly, me and my friend, I convinced, yeah, no, it was a real problem. I convinced one girl from my program to stay with me because we went as a group, and then we decided to stay, pay the extra, and do all the stuff. And we literally were driven out by hunger. Like, we could have stayed for hours more, but we didn't plan. We were both so hungry, and so we had to leave. So eat a bunch of food, pack snacks, bring water, and spend your whole day there because it was the coolest thing I've ever done.
That is a great tip. I've never heard that, but like I've heard of the forum, but I couldn't have told you much about it. And if it's a ruin, I would probably love it anyway because I love a good ruin.
It's so
that
it's
sounds
huge.
super cool.
It's huge, and there's so much, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's so cool. It's so cool. I loved it.
Man, I think I like glanced at it, so I guess I gotta go back to Rome.
Gotta go back,
Gotta go back.
Cheryl.
There's your excuse.
Darn.
There you go.
Yeah.
What else?
What else to do in Rome?
Or to skip.
Yeah, what's there even to do there?
Not a lot. No. Vatican City is super cool. And especially as a Catholic, I just I loved it. I did a papal address, so a general audience with the Pope. And there's technically like tickets for it, but that's more like for crowd control. They don't charge. But you're supposed to go in advance and get a ticket from there. And anyone can do it. It's just super early in the morning. And it was me and a couple other people from my program, and we got there at 6 a.m. This thing started at 8, and we were like, we're going to be in the front row. Like, we are going to see the Pope today. And we did. And in fact, we were in the front row, and we watched the whole thing. It's like 2 hours long, and only like 3 minutes of it is in English, and the rest of it is a bunch of different languages, mostly Italian. But just being able to see Pope Francis was so cool. And then at the end, he goes around and he does, he blesses the new couples. They have there are all these brides there in their full wedding dresses at 8 in the morning,
wow.
Commitment. And they all sit together and he goes and
Wow.
blesses them. And then, there's different traveling groups that get to sit up close, and he does special blessings for them. And we're standing there, we're waiting. And people are kind of trickling out because usually he doesn't come and say hello to everyone. But this was right when all of the COVID stuff was starting to happen, and the panic was setting in, and there was almost this feeling of don't go near anyone, stay away from people, don't trust people, be afraid. And Pope Francis was very clearly trying to make a statement about you don't be afraid of your neighbor, that sort of thing. He actually ended up walking down towards us, to the general audience, and I got to shake hands with Pope Francis.
Wow.
And it was the most amazing moment of my life. I'm not even gonna lie, it was so incredible. All my little Catholic hopes and dreams were just made in that moment. And he came up to us, and it was so cool because he spent almost an hour after it ended going around and shaking hands with everyone and saying hello to everyone and even talking to people. There was a woman 2 people down from me, and she actually had a conversation with him, and the girl I was with was a photographer, so she took this really cool photo of this woman laughing with Pope Francis and got her email afterwards and sent it to her. And it was just such a cool moment that I'll never forget. And honestly,
Wow.
I think if I had gone any other time, he usually doesn't come down to the audience. So I think if I had gone any other time, I wouldn't have gotten that. But just because it was during the whole COVID, the beginning kind of scare, and he was trying to, make a statement essentially about that. So it was very lucky. It was very special.
So did you get COVID from him then?
Yeah, no. I did get, okay, A bunch of people in our program got really, really sick though when we were there. It was just like a cold. But we all kind of freaked out. We are like, what if we had COVID? So we all went and got antibody tests. None of us had COVID. But there was like
Mm.
when we first got back, we were like, what if we had it? Like, what if
Mhm.
that happened? So we got like the antibody test and they were all negative. And we were like, oh, just a cold. Less exciting.
So, okay, we got to talk about COVID. I mean,
Yeah.
so crazy. What
Yeah.
was it like there?
So,
Well, maybe even just start with sort of the timeline of
Mm.
what was occurring
yeah.
in Italy, because I feel like stuff started there before we were really quite sure what was going on here.
Yeah. So it was so weird. And looking back at it, like looking back, the perspective is very odd because I think in Italy they were really trying to tamp it down. Like, I'm not gonna lie. They were really trying to say it was not a big deal. People were freaking
Mm.
out for no reason. You were fine. Don't worry about it. It's all good. And, everyone I knew from back home, like my parents and my friends, were hearing on the news all these scary stories about Italy and we're panicked and we're calling me and texting me and I'm like, it's fine. Like, there's no problem here. Nothing has changed. Everything is normal. People are not worried about it. So I think the way that it was portrayed, we're so different that like I was not aware until I came home how freaked out people were about Italy. Yeah.
Interesting.
And so there were some people in our program who were very, very nervous and they were like, I feel like I need to go home, all these things. So we actually had a conference with the guy who's in charge of study abroads at UW. Like he's the director of study abroads at UW. And he had contacted us before and said, if there's a problem, we'll get you out. No worries, all these things. And we had talked to our professors and they said, maybe be more careful, try to avoid crowds, but you're fine. Don't worry about it. The woman who was running the Rome Center, the UW Rome Center, she was like, don't worry about it. You guys only have a month left. Like the odds that you get sent home are so slim. I was in a conference. It was an optional conference. We could go a video Skype with the UW study abroad director and whoever wanted to come from current study abroads in Rome and Skype with him, ask him questions, all that stuff. And I went, I think it was like on a Tuesday or Wednesday of that week. And I literally watched this man say, the odds of you guys getting sent home are very slim. You're fine. Everything, don't worry about it. Like, seriously, you guys are okay. If it changes, we'll let you know, all that stuff. That was like on a Tuesday. A Saturday night at almost midnight, we got an email that said, program ends Monday. You should be gone by Friday.
Wow.
It,
yeah. So when was
so
that?
you're literally, that was end of February, very end of February. I flew out March 4th. I flew out 5 days after they sent us that email. And it was so crazy because it went from like 0 to 100. It went from you're fine, don't worry about it, people are freaking out, but it's not a big deal, to pack your bags and go, like right now. And so, having someone say to you, oh, you guys are fine, I'd be surprised if you got sent home. And then 4 days later, getting an email at midnight too, which was weird. Like they sent it really late at night. And they were like, your program ends on Monday. We're not going to kick you out of your housing, but you really should be gone by the end of the week. Yeah. And the last day I was in Rome, it was the most surreal kind of like day I've had in my life. Because Rome is a beautiful, sunny city, all throughout the year. So the 2 months we had been there, cold, very cold, but sunny and beautiful. And the Tuesday before I flew out, Wednesday before I flew out, it was cloudy, it was overcast, and it was windy, very, very windy. I literally saw a sign blow off of a building and almost hit someone, like super, super windy. And everyone had suitcases. There was not a single person walking around without a suitcase, and no one would look at each other, and no one would talk to each other. And you could almost hear like sirens. Like there were no sirens, but in my head there were like doomsday sirens going off. And I went to Trevi Fountain. We lived like maybe 10 minutes from Trevi Fountain by walking. Trevi Fountain. I mean, I've been there at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. and it is crowded either time. No one. And I have a
Wow.
picture of it. It was actually my mom who pointed this out to me. She was like, you better keep that picture because that is crazy. I went at like 2 p.m. in the middle of the day and there was no one at Trevi Fountain. I went to the Pantheon. There was no one at the Pantheon. I mean, it was empty. And everyone who
Wow.
was walking around had suitcases. And it was just the weirdest, like the most surreal experience of my life. And it happened within a few days.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm looking at a timeline of cases in Italy,
Mhm.
and on January 31st, there were 2 confirmed. February 20th, 3 cases.
Mhm.
February 23rd, 150 cases. March 4th, 3,089
Mhm.
cases. And it says March 4th, schools and universities are closed.
Yeah.
That day.
And that's the day I flew back.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's when it like skyrocketed. Was like the
Yes.
23rd, there were 150 cases.
And it was like that. It was like overnight. It was like a switch had flipped. Yeah, and it was such a weird experience. When you're living it, you're not really aware quite of what's going on. Like, you know what's going on, but you're like, as the implication of what's going on, you're not quite aware of. And then once I got home and I was really thinking about it, and then everything started shutting down here,
Right.
and I was like, wow.
There was
Like,
another, like 2 weeks, I think, after that, once we started to shut down in the Seattle area.
yeah.
I had an
So-
event on March 6th that was canceled, and I heard of other events canceled right around that day. And that was when it was like, really? We're canceling events over this? And then like right after that, it was like, shut down your life. So
Yeah.
yeah. Did you first hear about it from people back home or from people in
Mhm.
Italy? Like, how did you first hear about COVID?
My parents, because my parents were supposed to come, and actually we had planned a whole trip in northern Italy. I had mentioned earlier that's where like my mom's side of the family is from, and we were able to track down where my great grandparents were born. And so we had planned a whole like trip there. It's a tiny village, so we had like figured out how to get there, and we're super excited. And then we were gonna rent a car in Switzerland, and my parents love road trips, and so we were going to drive through Switzerland. We just had some really cool things planned, and I kept trying to call them, like, confirming like what dates are we doing these things, and like where are you guys going to stay when you come to Rome, blah blah blah. And very unlike my parents, they were like, oh well, we haven't quite figured it out yet, blah blah blah. And come to find, it's because of what was happening, right? And I just wasn't aware. Because again, like, we weren't getting that news, but in America, you guys were kind of getting the news that Italy was, some things were happening in Italy. So it was from my parents, and then other people in the program were hearing from their parents, and then that's kind of how it all came together.
That's just so weird that you heard about it from people in the U.S. and like didn't hear about it from like neighbors or that's so interesting.
Yeah.
But I guess on one level, at least what I'm remembering, the response here was very similar to what you described in Italy, just not quite as accelerated. Where, I mean, Cheryl, you even kind of said that, right? Like with that event that was canceled. Like, really? Do we really need to cancel this event?
Yeah.
Because early on, most people didn't realize, I mean, I didn't realize the extent to which it was going to be. Right. And then, okay, yeah, stuff's going on maybe in Italy or in China, but those are other countries halfway around the world from us, as opposed to what was going on here. But it just, in those few days, there was enough that all of a sudden we shut down. But even then, it was like, for us, we shut down for 2 weeks for school. And then it was the rest of the school year. And now we're still remote learning. But at the time, it was for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I know. I thought I'd be home for a couple weeks.
Yeah, I remember sitting with some of my friends, and they were like, what if UW, goes remote for spring quarter? And I literally laughed. I was like, you know how many thousands of people go to UW. They're not gonna do remote. Like, there's
Mhm.
thousands of people who work and study at UW, and you really think they're gonna go remote? And now I'm like, oh my gosh, Christine, like that
Yeah.
was, and then it happened. And
Yep.
so, but it just seemed back then. I was gonna say back then. It was like a couple months ago, but it was back then, a different time. It seemed
Yep.
Yeah.
so impossible. There were
Yes.
2 people on my flight back from Italy who wore masks, and I remember thinking, I was like, that's a little extreme. Like, I don't know if I'd. And now I'm like, well, everyone
Sure.
wears them, right? But there were only 2 people on my whole flight,
Yeah.
back from Italy, and then it's quit almost overnight. Now I'm like, I wouldn't go anywhere without
Well,
Yeah.
and now we
masks
like don't know
on.
what the bottom half of people's faces look like.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's crazy.
Was that flight full? How full was your flight?
Oh, everyone had a row to themselves, and not because, not on purpose. But it was a very empty flight.
Hmm.
And so they had spaced us out to all have rows to ourselves, which was really nice because then we could all kind of lay down and sleep. But no, it was
Mhm.
very
Fantastic.
empty.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
Interesting.
really nice.
But that's
Yeah.
because nobody was flying, not because they had instituted any of these, physical distancing measures yet.
No, they hadn't. There was no mask. There was
Social
no
distancing.
physical distancing. They did take our temperature before we got in.
Mm.
They did actually a scan, so they scanned your whole body to do kind of a temperature check, which was kind of cool and kind of freaky, but that was the only thing they did.
Mm.
Yeah.
But I
Huh.
think it's interesting what you're saying, Christine, about like it's not possible for UW to go online or things like that. I feel
Yeah.
like the response to COVID has shown us in a very negative way that anything is possible. Oftentimes you think like
Mhm.
anything's possible. We can do all
Yeah.
these things. And I think this is more
Yeah.
like, no, like if the world needs to shut down, like anything's possible. Like Disneyland could close for a year. I mean, like,
Well,
it's just like
Yeah.
all these things that we never thought.
yes. And
would happen.
Disneyland is a great example because I called my mom. I mean, I was very upset they were sending us home, obviously, because I was supposed to be there for another month, and I was
Mhm.
loved being there. I didn't want to go home, so I called my mom and I was like, "I'm so sad they're sending us home. I'm so sad you and Dad aren't coming. I had planned all these fun things for us to do in Rome, blah blah blah." And she said, "Well, why don't we go to Disneyland as a family instead?" And I was like, "Yes, like that's amazing." And so we planned this whole Disney trip because the great thing, not, I don't know, great thing, the nice thing that a lot of airlines and hotels and things were doing is we got full refunds on everything. I think my dad said in total he was out $200 for like a 2-week trip that we had planned all throughout Europe because everyone, which was very kind of people, everyone was refunding everything, pretty much no questions asked. And even I switched my flight 3 times to get home earlier, and they were just doing it for you. So people were very accommodating, which is very nice. So we were like, why not now go to Disneyland? So we planned a big trip to Disneyland. We were gonna stay in like the Grand Californian Hotel, and like I was so excited and all this stuff. And then like 5 days before we were supposed to go, maybe 3, like it was a few days.
Oh.
I had my suitcase out ready to get it shut down.
Oh.
And that was
jeez.
just like blow after blow. And I had quarantined for 2 weeks when I came back, because you're supposed to do. And the
Well,
day
you just
after,
come from Italy.
the day after my quarantine ended, like my personal quarantine, is when everything in the state and pretty much the country shut down. So it was like I finally made it out of quarantine, and then everyone else was in quarantine. So everyone was like, "Oh, puzzles and pajamas," and I was like, "I've been doing this for 2 weeks, like, and now I have to do more." So, yeah, that was kind of crazy.
Oh, boy.
But
yes, you have to do it for 2020.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you had another month still. How did this impact that Capstone project that you were working on?
Yeah, so the Capstone project, we pretty much scrambled to finish it. We were like, we're all leaving in a couple of days. Like, everyone just turn in the drafts that you have, and our editors are just gonna like pretty much give them free reign so they can fix whatever needs to be fixed. And then we all went home, and then we met over Zoom. And we were like, we still want to give this presentation. And the guy from Brussels agreed to do it over Zoom, which he was very, very nice. And so we still gave our presentation and we still turned in our final draft of the report, but it was all just kind of a little squished at the end and not quite what we were expecting, because usually it's like a whole day and it's a whole presentation and it's a really big thing and we do a dinner afterwards. The one nice thing though is both of our professors really wanted to make sure that we still had like a dinner. So they last minute, like the night before the program ended, put together a big dinner for us, and we all got to go to this really fun restaurant, and we just spent hours down there eating and drinking wine and laughing, and right before we were gonna go. So that was still like that was a really nice memory. And they worked really hard to make sure we got to end on that high note. Yeah,
that's
so
really sweet.
Yeah, it was. It really was.
Oh, that's good. Oh man. And then I think you gotta share what your original plans were for this fall, if it's not too sad.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, mentioned a few times, but the musical theater was one of my degrees. That's the one people typically remember because it's very fun, and a little different. But my other degree, that I'm focusing more on and want to keep studying in graduate school is international human rights. And it was my dream for 4 years in college. I was going to take a couple of years off, a gap between undergrad and graduate school, and travel. I wanted to work abroad. I wanted to have experience abroad. I really wanted to be in the Peace Corps. And so I applied to the Peace Corps while I was in Italy, actually, and I got in. And I was supposed to leave in June of this year, so like 3 weeks after I graduated. And I was going to teach English in the Eastern Caribbean. And then after I got into that, I'm actually TEFL and TESOL certified, so I'm certified to teach English. And so I applied for a position in Spain, a teaching position in Spain, not through the Peace Corps, through a different organization. And I got that. And then while I was in Rome, I heard about an internship that UW does, a year-long internship in Rome, and I applied for that, and I had made it to the very final interview. So I had 3 really cool options: Eastern Caribbean, Spain, Italy, and then all pretty much within the same week. Those went away, which is very sad. But on the bright side, I found Vision House, and I'm absolutely loving that. And I got to meet Cheryl, and so that was awesome. So it definitely was not the experience I thought I was going to have after college, not the abroad experience, but still a really, really good post-grad experience.
Wow.
And do you hope to still pursue, 2 questions, I suppose. Are you still planning to do grad school at some point? And then do you still want to try and do a similar international experience like what you were planning once things open up?
Yeah, so I actually just turned in my first grad school application over the weekend. So
congratulations.
Very exciting. Thank you. Very nerve-wracking. So yes, grad school. It's sooner than expected. I thought I was going to take like 2 years off. If I were to get in though, it'd only be a year. But I still got a little gap, which I thought was really important to get experience. But grad school is definitely still the goal and the hope. And I'm continuing with the international theme of education, and so hopefully, if I keep studying it, hopefully eventually I will actually be able to go out and do it. And so ideally, yes, I'd be working in a capacity in the future where I'm international.
Well, that's going to be a fun fact you get to share like 10 years from now, when we're like maybe 20 years from now, whenever people aren't like just bitter about COVID.
30 years from now.
It'll be a fun fact to be like, I was in Italy during COVID.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's a pretty big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll definitely be a very unique life experience. Already graduating in the pandemic was a very interesting experience, but being in Italy, being pretty much evacuated, it's definitely a pivotal life experience, I would say. Not one I don't think I'm going to forget anytime soon.
No.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like that, like, where were you when you heard about 9/11, or like different things like that. I was like,
Yeah.
where were you when you heard about COVID? Rome.
Rome.
Yeah.
From the Pope.
Italy.
The Pope told me when he shook my hand. So.
He did. He whispered in my ear. He said, "Get ready, Christine."
COVID is coming.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, thank you for sharing about this experience with us. We have a couple follow-up questions about your story.
Wonderful.
The first one is based on the title of our podcast, Take Me With You.
Mm-hmm.
If you could take us with you to just one thing in Rome, what would it be and why?
I would want to take you to Trastevere. Trastevere is the neighborhood right across the river from where I was, and it was only like a 10-15 minute walk. And it was just such a cool neighborhood. I actually have a drawing of it. I bought a drawing when I was there, and it's framed on my wall. And it makes me really happy to look at because it's just a very quintessential, like, Europe neighborhood and tiny little crisscrossy streets. And there's just so many restaurants and so many bars and so many shops and so many people. And you can go pretty much into any store and get a really nice bottle of wine, and you can go sit by the fountain and you drink your wine with your friends and you just chat, and it's just a nice little neighborhood. And so I'd definitely take you guys there with me.
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
Sign me up.
Yes,
Does that-
thank you
that
for
pass?
the invitation. Yeah. And this question's not quite as fun right now because of COVID times.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is either what is your next trip,
Mm-hmm.
or if you don't have a next trip lined up, what do you hope your next trip will be?
So I don't have a next trip lined up, but I really hope my next trip is if I get into a graduate school, I hope I have the opportunity to go and maybe look at the campus. Because I am applying to UW. That is one of the places. So I do know UW campus pretty well. But the other three places I'm applying to, I've never been there before. So we've got Penn State, so Pennsylvania. And then I have schools just outside of Boston and Chicago. I've never been to any of those places. And so it'd be really nice to be able to visit if I got in, hopefully I'll get into one of them. And then I could go visit campus there.
Fun. That's
Yeah.
very cool. And do you have any travel questions for us?
Yes, I do have travel question. I have one specific travel question for you. And I want to know how your traveling has changed in the past few years. Because I mentioned in the beginning, I think I'm still a relatively new traveler. My first international experience was right before college, so it's only been the last 4 years. And so I want to know, what kind of traveler were you earlier on, and what kind of traveler are you now, and what kind of traveler do you think you might be heading towards? Like, what has been the evolution there?
I think for both of us, doing this podcast has changed our travel styles, which I think we've kind of shared about. I know for me, that's coincided with getting married to a very chill person who wants to do less during the day and have more downtime and have less dedicated plans. And so I've heard from so many guests on this podcast about, like, even planners, they're like, don't over plan, like, maybe know your options, but don't go crazy with like commitments to time frames or whatever, so that you can actually enjoy wherever you are. And so I think that's a big one for me. I think for me, a really pivotal trip was when my sister and I went to Italy and Spain. I think it was 5 years ago, maybe 6. And we went hard for 2 weeks and saw all of the things, and that was great. And I got sick, and so it was something where I think we thought we were in college and had that energy level still. And so I think ever since then it's been maybe do not quite that many things on a trip, or maybe don't tack on all the cities so that you can be in a location for longer. And so I think it's slowing down as I go places, and I'm enjoying it as I do less on trips. So it's really hard. I'm an Enneagram 7. I want to do all the things, so it's really hard to to not like go to every single place and do the things. But
Yeah.
I think that's been kind of my style, that in the direction it's headed. So yeah,
I like that.
I think for me, it depends on how many years we're looking at as far as travel style being changed. I think I've become more confident as a traveler than I used to be. Like you were talking about earlier, Christine, when you step out and do it, like it gets easier the
Yes.
more you do. And I think
Yeah.
that's definitely true. But even with that, traveling can still be uncomfortable for me. For a lot of reasons. One is because I'm an introvert. Another reason is I'm a perfectionist, or in the language that Cheryl always says, I'm an Enneagram 1. So a lot of the things that people recommend about travel are extra hard for me, I think, and don't always actually make the experience more enjoyable for me. So planning less to a point can be enjoyable, but it can also actually increase my stress level as opposed to giving me more rest.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's kind of figuring out what that balance is, becoming more comfortable with those pieces where I maybe don't know all of the ins and the outs. And, I've in the last, how many years? 5 years, I've traveled solo, which I had never done before, through Europe. And so done some of that stuff on my own. I've traveled with friends who I hadn't, really done a lot of international travel with. So trying to coordinate with other people. So I think I've had more different travel experiences over time, and not just done one type of travel, which is kind of nice, because then you can learn more about yourself and what you like and what you don't like, and what you're, willing to be flexible with, and what is harder. And, I think you continue to learn more about yourself in travel. And now I've gone off and I'm like soapboxing, so I apologize, but
No, I love that. I think my biggest goal for myself, hopefully in the near future, COVID willing, is is to get to a solo travel point. I think solo travel does still intimidate me a lot. Which I actually I applied for a grant to travel solo for a year. But then, of course, COVID shut that one down. But even as I was planning it, I was like, "Oh, this is really intimidating," and like I'd have to be really good with myself, and relying on myself for anything. Like if you mess up a plan, it's on you. So I want to get. I think my next hope in my travel journey is that I can get to a point where I feel comfortable traveling solo.
Okay, so Christine.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you which episode numbers to listen to.
I
you
got
don't really
my
have
phone.
to write them down because this episode's going to come out and then you'll hear them. But, if you want. Episode 1, Ryan talks about a solo trip to Switzerland. Episodes 10 and 11, I talk about a solo trip to Spain. Episodes 48 and 49 with Alex Bell. He is delightful. And then also, I don't actually, those weren't solo trips, but he's very funny.
So we'll throw him in there.
And then, but he comes back, but I'm trying to see if there's anyone else who talks about a solo trip. Episode 70 with Christy Lloyd Jones, she talks about going to Spain, and she's like kind of with other people and then kind of on her own. So she has some good stuff to share about traveling solo. Episodes 106 and 107 that will be out by the time this episode is out, but not as of this moment that we're recording. Alex Bell comes back, and that is a solo trip.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's very fun. He goes hard, kind of like I feel like how I used to travel more, where like he doesn't sleep enough and stuff. But I think he has some good advice for like how to make friends along the way and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, those are
Yeah.
some episodes
Thank
I would
you.
recommend.
Episode 102, Egypt
Oh,
with
yes.
Kyle Maddox. He did
Oh.
Egypt by himself as well.
Yeah,
Egypt is
yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear some solo travelers,
Yeah. No, I'd
those
love
are
that.
fun.
I'd love that.
Not to
Awesome.
plug our own podcast or
Yeah.
anything.
Love it.
All right. Well, we're going to transition to the last segment of our podcast called Wish
Alrighty.
You Were Here. During this section, each of the three of us is going to share about a cool travel attraction from our wide variety of travels, cool things we've seen, maybe a restaurant or a scenic picture shot or something like that. You can think of it like a little postcard that has a snapshot that says, ooh, this thing's cool. Wish you were here. Cheryl, what would you like to do for your Wish You Were Here today?
I want to talk about food.
I'm so surprised.
I mean, I always want to talk about food. But I'm going to talk about a restaurant that is in New Orleans that I went to almost a year ago now on my honeymoon. And I think it was on the last night. And it's called Evangeline. And they have really good food. But the
Wait,
really
you're not
cool
going to share
thing-
about a restaurant that has really poor food?
Oh. You know what? Fair point. And they have lots of like the classic New Orleans dishes that you would expect. And we had like fried catfish and okra and, different things like that there. They have very fun cocktails. So that was great. But the super fun thing about this restaurant is it's like on this street with all these little restaurants, so they're just like all these buildings. I mean, they're like all connected, right? And so there's just, you walk in this little restaurant, but they have outdoor seating in the back. And it's this little like walled courtyard area with lights hanging up. And it's just like, you can see the stars and it's good weather there. So I was there in December, but like wearing a sleeveless dress in the evening. And it's all busy and loud on the street. And then you go back there and it's super quiet. And so it's like a fun little like secret outdoor eating spot, which was very fun. And Daryl picked it out, and he always picks out good food places. He's good at research. I think that's what it is. And so he found this restaurant. He didn't even know about their courtyard though. And so we go there and they're like, do you want to sit outside? And I was looking at the sidewalk and I was kind of thinking like, I don't even see tables out there. But I was like, yes. I mean, I do want to sit outside all the time. And so then he like took us in the back and it was this really cool courtyard. So anyway, go to Evangeline. It's fantastic. And eat some fried okra and tell me all about it.
Love that.
Perfect. Next time I'm in New Orleans.
Yep, for sure.
Yes.
Who knows where that'll be. Christine, what would you like to do for your Wish You Were Here?
Well, I am going to continue on Cheryl's trend here, and I will
Woohoo.
also be sharing about food.
Yeah.
I also love food. And I am blessed with a super cool older sister who lives in Manhattan, which is great because I get to visit her and I get to hang out in New York for a little bit, but then I get to leave New York. And I am not a New Yorker. Like, Courtney, you stay in New York. I'm going to go now because it gets a little overwhelming. But it's really awesome when I get to go visit her because she gets to take me. She, of course, gives me some really good recommendations of things, maybe more touristy things I can do on my own during the day when she's at work. But at night, I get to live like a real New Yorker, and she takes me to all the places that the real New Yorkers go to. And the one place we have to go to every time is Joe's Shanghai, and it is a dim sum place, and it's in Chinatown, and it is no reservations. You wait in a line out the door for literally hours. I mean, it is insane to get in. You sit at these giant round tables with complete strangers. they just pack you in. So you're there with a bunch of other people. You order so much food, you have to roll yourself out the door and into a taxi. And you also brought leftovers with you home. And if you were me and Courtney, you order an extra round of dumplings just to bring home.
Ooh, oh, I
And
love
it's
leftover
just,
dumplings.
it's the best. It is so good. And so that's my big recommendation. You got to do if you're in New York.
I just wish this podcast were video because Ryan's face is amazing. He is not sold. I don't think he's gonna go with you.
Not at all.
Ryan.
You're like waiting in line for hours. I'm like, ugh.
And sitting with
because
strangers.
you can't have a reservation, and then sitting with total strangers. I'm like, that sounds awful.
But right,
That
the
sounds
food,
awful.
The food is
And Ryan's not
See,
a
I'm
foodie.
not a
So this
foodie.
is
I'm not a
amazing.
foodie.
You
so
know what's funny
the
is-
food would have to be so good to make that
It
worth
is.
it for me.
It is so good. But what's hysterical about that is Ryan's face during Cheryl, when you were talking too, you mentioned catfish. And at the same time, then I went, yum. Ryan was like, oh, like his face was like, no, thank you. And my face was like, yes, please.
I'm like seafood and vegetables, and Ryan's like, no.
Thank you to either of those.
That's so funny. It's okay, Cheryl. We'll go to each other's restaurants. We'll go with
Okay.
each other.
I'm so
Ryan,
down
you just
for
gotta
that.
cut out.
That's, you know what? I'm okay with that.
I think the best we could get is if we saved a spot for Ryan in line and then
Yes.
told him when we were seated and he could join us, and then got people he knew to sit at the table with us so that he didn't have to sit with strangers. Would you go then, Ryan?
I'd think about it.
Cheryl's like, look at all these ways we'll accommodate you. And Ryan's like,
Because
maybe.
dumplings, dim
They're
sum is so,
so good.
I
They
love
are
You're
dim
gonna
sum.
hate me.
So good.
I don't even really know what dim sum is.
Tell
like, I'm
him.
sure I've had it before, but like, I just don't know.
It's like dumplings. Like if you've ever
Okay.
heard of
No,
like
but
Ding Tai
dim
Fung
sum
a
is
really...
the style of eating.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
See, I didn't know that.
Oh.
I just know like they're the little like soup dumplings, and they come in these like little steamer things, and you take off the lids, and it's really
Like
hot
bao?
and steamy. You kind of like
Yeah.
along those lines, but they've got like soup inside them.
But
I don't know
dim
how.
sum
Yeah.
is a style of the way that food is served.
Oh,
Because
okay.
they walk around the restaurant with carts with food on them.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you see something you want, you point to it and they put it on your table. So you get to see the food and then you're like, yep, that looks good. Nope, not interested in that. And you can just kind of keep getting more until you're
You're
full.
pushing me farther and farther away from doing this, Cheryl.
Oh,
That also sounds
Well,
terrible.
I love it because
Oh, no.
sometimes you read something on a menu and you're like, I can't picture that. How big
But if it's
is
a
it?
dumpling,
Does
you
it look
can't
good?
see it anyway. All you're looking at is the outside of the dumpling.
Well, okay, it's not just dumplings. It's all sorts of food. It's just
Oh,
like
okay.
it's Chinese food.
Okay.
But like it's a
Okay.
way that Chinese food is served.
I
As
see.
like
Okay.
the style of the
Gotcha.
restaurant is dim sum.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Christine, there's a dim sum place in Factoria I've never been to, but I just heard about, and apparently it's very good.
We have
Yeah.
to go.
I know, but they're not doing dine-in right now, and I feel like
Ugh.
dim sum has to be dine-in because that's kind of the whole point.
Yeah,
of
Yeah.
it, but
definitely.
yes. Ryan, tell
Yes.
us about obviously the restaurant that you're going to talk about. Just seafood.
Actually,
very
I
long
am going
line.
to talk to you about a restaurant.
Oh,
Yay!
I am. I was planning because I didn't figure it out several episodes ago in time, but I realized that we had talked about a particular food when Alex Bell was on the podcast. And I realized that, hey, I know of a really good restaurant that I go to all the time not all the time, all the time when I'm in Slovenia to have cevapcici. So I don't know if you remember us talking about that, Cheryl.
I mean, yes, because you were talking about food, so I do remember that.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you remember that.
Yeah.
And for those of you who maybe don't remember, I think we talked about that in episode 106 with Alex and his Dalmatian vacation. So you could always go back and hear the descriptions. But basically, in Ljubljana, the capital city of Slovenia, there is a restaurant just off from the main kind of downtown area called Sarajevo. And you have to like walk down these stairs, and it's it's like underground, so there's no windows to the outside, but the inside is super cool. And the way it's decorated, it's got all of this brick and different signs that have different sayings in, I think it's Bosnian, but it might be Serbian. I'm not sure. And it's not a super big place. None of the times that I've been there has it been super, super crowded, but they do really good cevapcici there. So you can get your Ivar and your kajmak and your cevapcici and you're set to go. Or you can get kokta too, if you wanted to. So there you go.
I wish I knew what any of those were.
It still makes me hungry, even though I don't know all of the words. I'm still so on board.
I relate to that. That.
So kajmak is a cheese that you put on the cevapcici, but it looks and behaves kind of like butter. Like it's really, really soft. It's kind of a light yellow color. So it looks a lot like butter. And then Ivar is like a red tomato sauce sort of based thing. I'm again, as a non-foodie, I'm sure that I'm not describing all of the right things to you both, and I apologize, but
no, it still sounds
you're saying the names of food. You're saying food words, so
I am saying food words.
But so now I'm hungry. We just talked about all these restaurants, and now I had dinner already. I want to go eat again.
Yeah, me too.
Kokta is and I don't know if it's specifically Slovenian or if it's just kind of Balkan, but it's their version of Coca-Cola.
Oh, fun.
It's not Coca-Cola, but it's similar to that. It just has like a unique, it's a little bit different flavor, but yeah, kind of like a soda pop. But it's good, and the only place I've ever seen it is when I'm in Slovenia. So I'm like, when I'm there, I'm gonna get some. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah,
food.
There you go. Are you happy? I did food.
I am happy. That's
I thought you might be.
Christine, thank you for being on our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I love being here. It was very fun.
Yay! Do you have anything that you would like to plug?
Yeah, so when you guys first asked me this, I was like, I don't really have anything too exciting, but then I remembered I have an Instagram for my dogs, and that's very exciting. And this is a shameless plea to all of your listeners. I am so close to 50 followers, and it would make my heart so happy if I could get 2 more followers so that my puppies can have 50 followers on Instagram. So Buford and Peaches. On Instagram, Buford and Peaches. I have a corgi and a mini dachshund, so they are very cute little puppies. If you would like to follow them.
I always love a dog follow, but how do you spell Buford? Because I didn't spell it right.
Yeah, so my sister named this dog. Charles Buford Bass Munson is actually his full name.
Oh my.
This is how different me and my sister are. She got a corgi, named him Charles Buford Bass Munson. We call him Buford, or Boo Boo for short. And I got a mini dachshund, and I named her Peaches. So that is how. But Buford is Beauford and A-N-D, and then Peaches, Peaches. Buford and Peaches.
Did you find it there, Cheryl?
Following.
Yes. Oh, I just got the notification. Amazing.
Look at that. Real time.
Love it.
Oh, they're cute.
Right? They're cute little puppers.
Buddies. Oh, I like them. They're cute.
You can also follow us at Take Me With You Podcast. We are at TMWY Podcast on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter.
You can also email us at timwepodcast@gmail.com. Send us suggestions of topics we should cover, guests we should have on, and what famous religious figure's hand have you shaken? We want to hear about it.
Yes, we do. You can also call us and leave us a voicemail. The number here is 406-763-8699, or another way to remember that is 406-POD-TIMWE. we would really appreciate it if you would rate and review our podcast to tell other people how you feel about it. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of our new episodes, and share about this episode on your social media so that other people can hear about Christine's cool experiences with the Pope, and then also being in Italy during COVID-19.
As always, thank you to Beth Reed Miller for the awesome artwork. You can check out more of Beth's artwork at Beth is Something. And thank you to Erica Corbin for the use of her song Round the Globe. You can listen to Erica's music wherever music is sold or streamed.
Christine, it's been great having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. It's been awesome.
Yay!
Well, that's all we have for this week's episode. So until next time, remember to take me with you.
Take me with you.
Can we get a sailboat chasing down the sunset as we float round and round the globe? Salty air and balmy nights, guided only by the lights above and a little love. All the world is out there waiting to explore, and all our troubles here want them to be ignored. Oh, let's go to India and I